The world didn't notice when the high table fell. There were no headlines, no emergency broadcasts, no governments admitting something ancient had just died. But somewhere deep inside classified networks, places even satellites don't look, alerts began quietly stacking on top of each other. Assassination markets destabilized. Long-standing intermediaries vanished. Entire shadow routes went dark overnight. And at the center of every unexplained collapse, there was one constant. A man no government controlled. A man no system could predict. A man who wasn't supposed to survive long enough to become a problem. His name never appeared in public records. But when the IMF finally opened the file, Ethan Hunt realized something terrifying. John Wick wasn't part of the mission. He was the reason the mission existed. Rain pressed against the glass walls of an IMF sub-level analysis room in Vienna, turning the city lights outside into streaks of blurred gold. Inside, the air was sterile, quiet, too quiet for the kind of data scrolling across the main screen. Red markers blinked out one by one. Rome, Osaka, Casablanca, New York. Each represented a node that had existed for decades, unofficial, deniable, carefully ignored by every intelligence agency on Earth. Financial corridors that moved blood money, safe zones where rules mattered more than flags. Now they were gone. An analyst broke the silence, her voice low, controlled. We're not seeing a transfer of power. No successor structure. No consolidation. She zoomed in on a timeline. It's erasure. Ethan Hunt stood with his hands on the back of a chair, jacket still on, eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't blink. He never did when something didn't make sense yet. People don't just dismantle systems like this, Luther Stickles said from the console, fingers moving fast. Not without resources. Or permission, Benji added, uneasy. Or an army. Ilse Faust leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Unless the system was built on rules, she said, and someone decided to stop following them. Another file opened. Grainy surveillance footage filled the room. Nighttime, rain-slicked streets, bodies already down before the camera caught up. The footage jumped, stuttered, struggled to keep pace with the man moving through it. Efficient, relentless, almost quiet. Ethan leaned in slightly. That footage is 12 hours old, the analyst said. Berlin. Benji frowned. We don't have assets in that sector. You didn't, the analyst replied. Neither does anyone else now. The room shifted as a new layer of data surfaced. Financial institutions frozen mid-transaction, encrypted lines severed, handlers missing. Not dead, just gone. Luther exhaled slowly. This isn't chaos, he said. This is cleanup. Ethan finally straightened. Who's responsible? The analyst hesitated. That alone was an answer. She tapped her tablet and the main screen went black for half a second before a single file appeared. No agency watermark, no origin stamp. Just a bold red label at the top. Unsanctioned asset. This designation doesn't exist, Benji said quietly. It does now, Ilse replied. Ethan stepped forward. The file resisted him at first, layers of security peeling back only after biometric confirmation from 3 separate directors, none of whom were in the room. A photo resolved on the screen. Not a mugshot, not surveillance. A clean, composed image taken at close range. A man in a black suit, rain beading on his collar, eyes forward, not defiant, not afraid, just present. Ethan felt the shift before he understood it, a pressure behind the eyes. The instinct that told him this wasn't a ghost story. This file was buried, Luther said, reading fast. No fingerprints in any database. No birth records. No confirmed nationality. Ilse's gaze stayed on the photo. But everyone knows him. The analyst swallowed. Informally, he's been referred to as Baba Yaga, the boogeyman. The man you send to kill the thing you're afraid of. Benji forced a breath. That's comforting. Ethan didn't smile. He scrolled. Confirmed eliminations stacked into the hundreds, then thousands, each marked with the same note, independent operation, no handler, no extraction. No government ties? Ethan asked. None, the analyst said. He doesn't take contracts from states, never has. So why now? Luther asked. Why tear down an entire shadow economy? Ethan's eyes stayed on the man in the photo. Because he was part of it, Ethan said, and now he's not. Silence followed that, heavy, final. Another alert chimed, fresh data. A secure line from IMF command lit up, priority override. Ethan didn't answer it immediately. Somewhere in the rain-soaked streets of a city that no longer had safe ground, a man walked alone, carrying the consequences of a war no one admitted had happened. And for the first time, the world's most secretive intelligence agency understood the truth. John Wick was no longer contained by rules. And men like that didn't disappear. They collided. The first safe house fell without a sound. No explosion, no gunfire, no frantic emergency signal. Just a routine IMF check-in that never came. In a quiet residential block outside Prague, a reinforced apartment sat undisturbed for 12 hours before anyone noticed something was wrong. By the time an IMF retrieval team breached the door, the lights were still on. Coffee sat cold on the table, laptops were open, frozen mid-encryption. The agents were gone. Not dead, not captured, simply removed. Rain streaked down the windows of an underground IMF operations hub in Brussels as red alerts began stacking faster than analysts could clear them. Screens glowed in the dim room, painting faces in sharp blue light. That's the third courier in 48 hours, Benji said, voice tight, as his fingers flew over the keyboard. No struggle, no digital footprint. They don't even register as missing yet, just absent. Luther leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Roots? Benji pulled them up. The lines overlapped across Europe like veins. Rome to Vienna, Vienna to Zurich, Zurich to Berlin, all clean corridors, all ours. Ilse Faust stood apart, arms crossed, watching patterns form where others saw chaos. Someone's walking between us, she said, not hitting us directly, just stepping through. Ethan Hunt said nothing. He stood behind them, jacket off now, sleeves rolled, studying the screen like it might flinch. Another alert chimed. Safe house, compromised. Paris. This one was still active, Luther muttered. No reason it should have been touched. Ilse's eyes flicked to Ethan, unless someone else needed it empty. Cut to Paris, night. The city glistened under rain and streetlights, the Seine swollen and black beneath the bridges. In a narrow alley behind a nondescript building, a courier staggered into the shadows, clutching his side. He didn't hear the footsteps until they stopped. The man turned, breath hitching. John Wick stood under the flickering light, rain darkening his suit, pistol low at his side. His expression was calm, almost tired. He took in the courier's jacket, the subtle bulge beneath it, the way the man's eyes kept darting toward the street. You don't know who I am? The courier said, voice shaking. I don't want any trouble. Wick said nothing. He stepped closer. The courier reached for his gun. The movement was never completed. Wick disarmed him in one fluid motion, twisting the wrist, driving the man into the brick wall hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. The courier slid down, gasping. Wick crouched, eyes level with his. "Who are you moving for?" The courier swallowed, fear cutting through training. I don't know. Dead drops, burn phones, same as always." Wick glanced at the jacket again, a familiar cut, familiar stitching. Not Continentals, something else. He took the drive from the man's pocket, snapped it cleanly in half, then stood. He didn't kill the courier. He never did when the job didn't require it. Sirens echoed somewhere distant. Wick was already gone. Back in Brussels, Ethan watched satellite feeds replay the Paris incident in fragments, glitches, blind spots, frames missing entirely. "Someone jammed our surveillance grid without tripping alarms," Benji said, disbelief creeping in. "That's not possible." "Everything's possible," Ethan replied. "We just don't like admitting it." Ilsa leaned in. "Look at the movement. He doesn't circle targets. He passes through them." Luther nodded slowly. "He's not hunting us. We're just in the way." Another feed popped up. Berlin. Night vision this time. A team moving through an alley, IMF tactical gear unmistakable. They advanced cautiously. Then the feed cut to static. When it returned, the alley was empty. No bodies, no weapons. Just a single black coin lying in a puddle, rain rippling around it. Benji stared. "Is that currency?" Ilsa's jaw tightened. "Not ours." Ethan felt the same pressure as before and the sense of something vast brushing past their carefully constructed world. "He's operating parallel to us," Ethan said. "Not above, not below." "Like a ghost," Benji whispered. "No," Ethan corrected. "Ghosts don't leave patterns." The room went quiet as the implications settled in. Every algorithm IMF relied on, predictive models, behavioral analysis, probability matrices, assumed systems collided head-on. This man didn't collide. He flowed. Luther broke the silence. "If he keeps moving like this, he's going to dismantle half our European infrastructure, without ever meaning to." Ethan straightened. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened screen, older, sharper, familiar with impossible odds. "Then we stop trying to track him like a target," he said. Ilsa looked at him. "And do what?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the image of the coin, still spinning slowly in a puddle. "We follow the gaps," he said, "because whoever this man is..." Another alert flared, critical priority. A safe house in Berlin, active, manned. Ethan didn't wait for confirmation. He's already there. The building looked like nothing. A narrow hotel on a side street in Vienna, its stone facade, weathered and forgettable. Windows warm with amber light against the night rain. Tourists passed without slowing, taxis idled. A bell chimed softly as guests came and went. Ethan Hunt watched it from across the street, collar up, rain threading down his face. If not for the anomalies, encrypted traffic spiking and vanishing in precise intervals, he would have dismissed it entirely. "That's it?" Benji's voice murmured in his ear. "Because I've stayed in worse." "That's the point," Ethan replied. Ilsa stood beside him under the awning of a closed cafe, eyes scanning reflections in the glass. "No cameras on the exterior," she said. "At least none we can see." "Inside is different," Luther added from the van. "There's a local network here that doesn't connect to anything else. No uplink, no downlink. Like it doesn't want to be found." Ethan crossed the street. Inside, the air changed. Not colder, heavier. The lobby was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with silence. Dark wood, polished marble. A long desk manned by a single concierge in a tailored suit. His posture was perfect. His smile practiced. "Good evening," the concierge said. Do you have a reservation? Ethan met his eyes and felt it immediately. Not fear, assessment. No, Ethan said, but I was told this was a neutral place. The concierge's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. Recognition passed like a shadow. It is, he said carefully, for those who belong. Ilsa shifted behind Ethan, fingers loose near her coat. Benji's breathing spiked slightly in Ethan's ear. I don't, Ethan continued, but someone I'm looking for does. The concierge paused, just long enough. You should leave, he said. The lights flickered. Not a power failure, a signal. Luther's voice sharpened. Ethan, I'm seeing movement below you, a lot of it. The lobby doors locked with the soft, final sound. Figures emerged from the periphery, men and women in tailored black, their movements controlled, eyes alert, no insignia, no weapons visible, yet every step said armed. Ilsa exhaled slowly. Definitely not a hotel. A man stepped forward, older, composed, authority woven into his stillness. This is a continental, he said. We do not answer questions. We enforce rules. What kind of rules? Ethan asked. The man's gaze flicked to the locked doors. The kind that keep wars from spilling into public. Luther cut in. Ethan, I'm pulling archive chatter. References to places like this go back decades, maybe longer. Ethan looked around again, seeing it now not as a building, but as an artery, a node. You operate outside governments, Ethan said, outside law. The man nodded once. We operate beneath them. A distant sound echoed through the structure, muffled, heavy, not thunder. Gunfire. The authority in the man's face cracked. He turned sharply. Secure the lower levels. Too late. The floor shuddered, glass rattled. Somewhere below something was being systematically dismantled. Ilsa's eyes widened. He's here. The name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. Ethan moved as alarms finally screamed to life, not loud, not public, internal, controlled panic. The neutral space was being violated, and everyone in the building felt it. They descended the service stairwell, the air thick with smoke and cordite. Bodies lay where they fell, security teams, precise shots, no excess, Wick's signature, even if Ethan had never seen it before. A door ahead burst open. John Wick emerged, reloading as he moved, expression focused, distant. He didn't see Ethan at first. He was already calculating exits, threats, angles. Then their eyes met. Time slowed. Ethan saw exhaustion etched into Wick's face. Not weakness, but the weight of something long overdue. Wick saw a man who moved like a mirror, disciplined, deliberate, dangerous. They didn't raise their weapons. Not yet. IMF, Ethan said, calm but loud enough to cut through the chaos. You're compromising a neutral structure. Wick didn't answer immediately. His gaze flicked past Ethan, registering Ilsa, the stairwell, the locked routes. Neutral's a lie, Wick said finally. His voice was low, flat. It just picks who gets to kill. Another explosion rocked the building, sprinklers activated, rain cascading indoors. Ilsa tightened her grip. Ethan! But Ethan was already seeing it, the overlap. Two hidden systems occupying the same space, believing they were invisible. What are you doing? Ethan asked. Wick's eyes hardened. Ending it. He moved past them, not attacking, not slowing, just passing through like everything else. Luther's voice broke in, urgent. Ethan, IMF command is online. They've confirmed the Continental exists. Orders just came through. Ethan watched Wick disappear into smoke and falling debris. Map the entire network, Command said. Every location, every rule. Ethan didn't respond. Because as the building burned from the inside out, he realized the truth too late. They weren't mapping a system. They were chasing a man who had already decided to erase it. The shot was clean. Ethan Hunt lay prone on a rain-slicked rooftop overlooking an abandoned rail depot in eastern Berlin. The city stretched beneath him in fractured light and steel. Wind tugged at his coat, cold and sharp, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the closer sound of boots on concrete below. In his scope, John Wick moved through shadow, not running, not hiding, walking with purpose between rusted rail cars, rain beading on his black suit, shoulders squared like a man already past fear. Ethan adjusted his breath, slowed his pulse. One squeeze would end it. IMF command had been clear. Unknown asset, global destabilizer, termination authorized. Visual confirmed, Luther whispered in his ear. You have a window, 20 seconds. Ethan didn't answer. Something was wrong. Thermals bloomed across the scope, figures converging from multiple angles. Not police, not IMF, professional, coordinated, overconfident. A kill team, tightening the net round Wick without realizing they were already inside his. Benji's voice cracked with urgency. Ethan, I'm counting at least 8 hostiles. They're not ours. Ilsa, watching from a separate vantage, went still. They're hunting him. Below, Wick stopped, just for a heartbeat. His head tilted slightly, eyes unfocused, listening. The rain masked nothing for him. He turned, calm as a man checking his watch. The first attacker broke cover too early. Wick moved. A gun came up from beneath his coat and barked twice, sharp, final. The attacker fell before the sound fully echoed. Wick didn't pause. He flowed into motion, using the rail cars as shields, closing distance with terrifying efficiency. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. Then he watched Wick spare a worker. The terrified maintenance man froze near a generator, hands raised. Wick saw him, shifted his angle, took a hit to his sleeve rather than fire through the man. Blood darkened the fabric. Wick didn't react. He eliminated the shooter instead, with a close, brutal strike that never strayed an inch toward the civilian. Ethan exhaled. Jesus, Benji muttered. He's controlling the battlefield. The kill team adapted, fanning out, firing in disciplined bursts. Wick answered with precision, no wasted rounds, no collateral. Bodies fell where they stood, shots placed to end fights, not prolong them. One attacker lunged with the blade. Wick disarmed him, twisted the wrist, and drove the man to the ground hard enough to crack concrete. He hesitated, just a fraction, before delivering the final blow. Not mercy. Judgment. Ilsa's voice was tight. This isn't chaos, this is restraint. Ethan watched Wick reload behind cover. Movements economical, almost gentle. This wasn't a criminal mastermind directing violence from afar. This was a man walking straight through it. Ethan, Luther said quietly, Command's asking why you haven't fired. Ethan tracked Wick again, crosshairs steady on his chest. The shot was there. Wick paused near a fallen attacker, retrieving a dropped weapon, rain washing blood into the cracks of the concrete. A perfect kill. Ethan's jaw clenched. He's not the mission, Ethan said. Silence on the line. He's the variable, Ethan continued. There's a difference. Below, the last attacker made a desperate move, firing wildly toward the depot's edge, where a family had taken cover beneath an overhang. Wick reacted instantly, stepping into the line of fire, taking a round through the shoulder as he returned fire with lethal accuracy. The family screamed. Wick was already moving again, putting himself between them and any remaining threat. Ethan lowered the rifle. "Ethan, what are you doing?" Benji asked. "Watching," Ethan said. Wick staggered briefly, pain finally registering. He leaned against a rail car, breath heavy, blood soaking through his sleeve. For a moment he looked exactly what he was, a man exhausted by endless war. Then he felt it, the weight of being seen. Wick's head snapped up, eyes locking onto the rooftop. Not the scope, not the rifle. "Ethan." They held each other's gaze across distance and rain. Two professionals, two ghosts. Wick didn't raise his weapon, he didn't run. He simply acknowledged Ethan's presence with a slow, knowing look, an unspoken message. "If you're going to do it now." Ethan didn't. Thunder rolled across the city as sirens began to approach, delayed and confused. Wick turned away, disappearing into the maze of rail lines and darkness, leaving only bodies and silence behind him. Luther spoke first. "Command's furious." "They will be," Ethan said, dismantling the rifle. His hands were steady. Ilsa exhaled slowly. "You just disobeyed a direct order." Ethan watched the rain wash the blood from the concrete below, leaving no trace of the line Wick refused to cross. "No," Ethan said. "I made a decision." He turned far from the edge of the rooftop, already knowing one thing with absolute clarity. John Wick wasn't a villain, but he wasn't an ally either. And letting him walk away had just changed everything. The order came through encrypted channels with no preamble and no room for interpretation. "Termination authorized." Ethan Hunt stood in the safe house bathroom in Berlin, water running hard in the sink to mask sound. Neon from the street bled through the frosted window, painting his reflection in sickly reds and blues. He stared at his own eyes in the mirror as the message auto-deleted itself from his contact lens display. No capture, no negotiation, no discretion. John Wick was now classified as an existential destabilizer. Ethan shut off the water and stepped back into the main room. Luther was already there, laptop open, jaw tight. Ilsa leaned against the wall near the window, arms folded, watching the street like it might suddenly turn hostile. "They've escalated," Luther said without looking up. "Global priority. Wick's no longer an unknown, he's a correction." Benji's face appeared on the secure tablet feed, pale. "They're spinning it fast. Narrative's shifting. He's being framed as the cause, not the symptom." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He moved to the window and looked out over Berlin. Wet streets, flashing lights. A city that had no idea how close it had come to being collateral the night before. "They don't understand him," Ethan said finally. Ilsa let out a short breath. "They don't need to. He scares them." Luther turned the screen toward Ethan. "They're mobilizing assets across Europe. Drones, SIGINT, kill teams. Not just to find him." Ethan's reflections stared back from the dark glass. To erase him. Silence settled, heavy and familiar. "We've crossed this line before," Benji said carefully, "and it never ends well." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, not in doubt but in acceptance. He'd felt this turn before, the moment when the mission stopped being about orders and became about consequences. "He's dismantling something," Ethan said. "Something old. Something that's been hiding in plain sight." "And people are dying because of it," Ilsa shot back. "People have been dying because of it for decades," Ethan replied, sharp but controlled. "He's just refusing to pretend it's stable." Luther leaned back, running a hand over his face. "IMF command doesn't see purpose. They see unpredictability." "They always do," Ethan said. The tablet chimed again, and this time it wasn't an order. It was surveillance, live feeds lighting up across the room as systems came online without permission. Ilsa straightened. That's not us. Luther's fingers flew. They've activated internal tracking. Full spectrum. They're not just watching Wick anymore. Benji swallowed. They're watching us. On one screen, a satellite view zoomed in on the block. On another, biometric readings flickered, heart rates, heat signatures, movement vectors. Ethan felt the shift in the room, the subtle change when a safe house stopped being safe. They anticipated resistance, Luther said. From you. Ethan nodded once. Of course they did. A new message burned across the central display, stripped of formalities. Stand down. You are compromised. Ilsa's eyes met Ethan's. Say the word. Ethan didn't hesitate. Burn it. Luther's fingers slammed keys, hard drives fried in rapid succession, screens going black as encrypted failsafes triggered, the lights flickered. Somewhere above them, a drone passed overhead, its hum cutting through the rain. Benji's voice shook. You know what this means? Ethan grabbed his jacket, checking his sidearm, movements precise. It means they're going to come for me before they come for him. Ilsa stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're choosing him over the IMF. Ethan met her gaze. I'm choosing not to kill the wrong man. Outside, tires screeched. Vehicles boxed the block with practiced efficiency. Shadows moved at the edges of windows and Luther closed the laptop. We're out of time. Ethan moved first, leading them toward the rear exit, already calculating routes, blind spots, delays. This wasn't new territory, just familiar consequences. As they slipped into the alley, rain hammering down, Ethan's earpiece crackled one last time. A calm voice, command level, controlled, disappointed. You were warned, Ethan. He didn't reply. He knew the truth now, with the clarity that only comes when lines are crossed and can't be redrawn. John Wick was not his mission. But letting the IMF decide Wick's fate would make Ethan complicit in preserving a system that fed on silence and called it balance. Ahead, the alley opened into darkness. Behind them, IMF surveillance tightened its net, algorithms recalibrating, this time with Ethan Hunt marked as the anomaly. As he disappeared into the rain, one thing became unavoidable. The IMF was no longer watching the world. It was watching him. Gunfire echoed through the rain-soaked service tunnel beneath Rotterdam before the first body hit the ground. John Wick moved through the narrow concrete corridor like a blade drawn through water. Each step measured, each shot final. Muzzle flashes strobed against damp walls, briefly illuminating warning signs in Dutch and the wide, shocked eyes of men who realized too late they were not facing a rival crew. These weren't assassins. They wore no pins, carried no coins. Their weapons were military-grade, their movements trained, but stiff. Government stiff. Wick disarmed the last one with a brutal twist, slammed him against the wall and pressed the barrel of his pistol beneath the man's jaw. Water dripped from exposed pipes overhead, splashing against the man's face. "Who sent you?" Wick asked. The man's lips trembled. You broke the rules." Wick's eyes hardened. "Which ones?" The hotels, the safe zones. They were leverage without them." He swallowed. "Agencies moved in, took over routes, contracts. We're just enforcing new oversight." Wick didn't blink. "Who?" he repeated. The man named an agency, then another, then another. Wick fired. The tunnel fell silent except for the rain. He stepped over the bodies and climbed the service ladder into the night. Rotterdam sprawled above, container cranes looming like skeletons against a storm-lit sky. Ships idled in the harbour, lights flickering as encrypted communications pulsed invisibly between them. Wick pulled a burner phone from his pocket. It vibrated once. A message, coordinates, time, one word. Parley. The abandoned warehouse smelled of oil and rust. Flickering floodlights cast long shadows across stacked crates stamped with shipping codes that meant nothing to civilians and everything to the underworld. Wick entered without caution. A woman waited inside, seated at a metal table. Her suit was immaculate, her posture calm. A single gold coin rested on the table between them, polished, deliberate. "You're early," she said to "See, you're using my world," Wick replied. She smiled faintly. "Your world had no borders, no accountability." Wick stopped 3 feet from the table, close enough to kill her before she finished a sentence. "The Continental was neutral," she continued. "I know you disagree, but neutrality created inefficiency. Safe passages, protected assets. We've adapted those rules." "You broke them," Wick said. "We repurposed them." She slid a tablet across the table, footage played, assassin convoys rerouted under military escort, contracts reassigned, handlers replaced by analysts. "Rules are just tools," she said. "Ammunition, really. Whoever controls them controls the flow of violence." Wick's jaw tightened. "You don't control it." The woman leaned back. "We already do. You removed the high table. Nature abhors a vacuum." Outside engines idled. Wick counted them by sound alone. "You're not free," she said. "You're just unowned. And that's inefficient." Wick moved. The table flipped. The coin spun into darkness. Wick crossed the distance in a heartbeat, gun up, shots echoing through the warehouse as armed teams poured in from every entrance. He moved through them with ruthless clarity, breaking lines, using cover, collapsing angles. But something had changed. These men knew Continental rules. They didn't fire inside marked zones. They herded him away from exits. They used old protections as traps. Wick took a hit to the ribs, grunted, adapted. He fought his way out through a loading bay, disappearing into the night as floodlights shattered behind him. Miles away, in a derelict safe house lit by flickering bulbs, Wick tended to his wounds. Blood darkened his hands as he wrapped his side, breath steady despite the pain. He stared at the gold coin resting on the table beside him, the same one he'd retrieved from the warehouse floor. It meant nothing now. The rules that once kept monsters in check were being sold, repackaged, enforced by people who had never paid the cost of them. Wick stood slowly, pain radiating through his body, and looked at the city through a cracked window. For the first time he understood the shape of the war. This wasn't about vengeance anymore, or freedom, or even survival. As long as any system remained, any structure that could be seized, rewritten, weaponized, there would always be another hand on the trigger. Wick crushed the coin in his fist, metal biting into skin. Freedom wasn't found by escaping the system. It was found by erasing every place it could hide. Somewhere in the city, encrypted networks shifted, agencies tightening their grip, unaware they had just become the targets in a war with no neutral ground left. John Wick picked up his gun and stepped back into the rain. The rules were no longer protection. They were targets. The lights came on one by one, slow and deliberate, revealing a room that shouldn't exist. Concrete walls scarred by old fire, a single steel table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs facing each other. No cameras, no signals, no identifiers of any kind. The air smelled of dust and ozone, rainwater dripping steadily through a crack in the ceiling and pooling near a floor drain. John Wick stood near the far wall, pistol low, posture relaxed but coiled. He hadn't heard Ethan Hunt arrive, but he'd known the moment he crossed the threshold. Ethan closed the door behind him and locked it manually. No rush, no sudden moves. His jacket was damp, his face tired in the way that came from weeks without clean exits. They studied each other in silence. Up close, Ethan saw the damage Wick carried, not just the stitched wounds and bruises blooming beneath his collar, but the stillness of a man who had learned not to expect relief. Wick saw something similar in Ethan's eyes, resolve layered over exhaustion, discipline sharpened by regret. "You came alone," Wick said. "So did you," Ethan replied. Wick gestured to the empty room. "This place isn't continental." "It's not IMF either," Ethan said. "That's why it works." A beat passed. Wick stepped forward and set his pistol on the table, barrel turned away. Ethan didn't reach for his own. They sat. Rain drummed louder above them, filling the silence without breaking it. "You've been burning structures," Ethan said, "and not just people." Wick leaned back slightly. "Structures burn people." Ethan watched his hands, scarred, steady. "You know what happens when systems collapse." Wick met his gaze. "I know what happens when they don't." A flicker of something passed between them, not agreement, recognition. "You're being hunted," Ethan said, "by agencies that think they can control what you dismantled." "They already think they do," Wick replied. "That's the problem." Ethan exhaled slowly. "You're forcing governments into the open." Wick's mouth tightened. They were never hidden. A drip hit the table between them, water spreading like a dark coin. "You didn't kill the courier in Paris," Ethan said. Wick glanced down at the spreading water, then back up. "He wasn't the target." "You didn't fire when you saw me in Berlin," Ethan continued. Wick's eyes narrowed slightly. "You didn't fire either." Ethan allowed a faint, humorless smile. "We both made calculations." "Yes," Wick said, "different ones." Ethan leaned forward, forearms on the table. "You think erasing the system ends the violence." "I think leaving it intact guarantees it," Wick replied. "And what replaces it?" Ethan asked. Wick was quiet for a moment. The rain filled the space. "Nothing," he said finally. "That's the point." Ethan absorbed that. He'd spent his life preventing vacuums because vacuums invited chaos. Wick lived in the aftermath of chaos, where rules were just names people gave to their fear. "You don't believe in missions," Ethan said. Wick shook his head. "I believe in ends." "And the cost?" Ethan asked. Wick's eyes hardened, just slightly. "Paid in advance." Another silence, heavier this time. Ethan stood and walked a slow circle around the room, not threatening, just thinking aloud. "IMF is built on the idea that if the right people act in the shadows, the world stays stable." Wick watched him carefully. "And does it?" Ethan stopped, didn't answer. "You were trained to stop threats," Wick continued. "I was trained to become one." Ethan turned back. "You don't act like a man who wants power." Wick's voice was flat. "Power wants me." A distant rumble echoed, thunder or something else. Both men clocked it instantly. "Your people are watching," Wick said. "So are yours," Ethan replied. Wick almost smiled. Almost. Ethan reached into his pocket and placed a small device on the table. It powered down with a soft click. 15 minutes, Ethan said. "After that, this place won't be invisible anymore." Wick glanced at the device, then back at Ethan. "Why are you here?" Ethan held his gaze. "To decide whether stopping you would make the world better or just quieter." Wick stood, retrieving his pistol, tucking it away without hurry. "And?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He felt the weight of every mission he'd ever finished, every compromise justified by survival. Wick stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could smell rain and gun oil. His voice dropped, not hostile, curious. "You break rules for the mission," Wick said. "I break missions for the rule." He paused, eyes locked on Ethan's. "Tell me something," Wick said. Ethan waited. "When the mission ends." A faint hum crept into the walls, the first whisper of surveillance reacquiring the space. Wick finished the question quiet and cutting. "Who do you work for?" Rain pounded the rooftops of Istanbul, turning the city's ancient stones slick and reflective. The Bosphorus glimmered under storm-smeared lights as helicopters hummed low overhead, their searchlights cutting through sheets of water. Somewhere below the Continental's network, a web of safe routes, hidden vaults, and silent couriers was under attack. Ethan Hunt crouched behind a shipping container in a deserted port, breathing measured, eyes scanning thermal feeds streaming from drones overhead. Beside him, Benji tapped frantically on a tablet, trying to make sense of incoming data that refused to behave. "Ethan, it's everywhere. They've cut off our usual channels. Every Continental node in the city is under siege. And these guys, they're not just mercs. They're a syndicate with deep intelligence backing, Russian, Middle Eastern, maybe both." Ilse Faust leaned against the side of the container, rifle loose in her grip, watching shadows stretch across crates. "And Wick?" she asked, her voice low. "Where's he?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He watched a figure move with unnerving precision between the chaos. A man in a black suit, rain sliding down his shoulders, pistol low but ready. John Wick. The first wave of attackers erupted from the dockside warehouses, automatic fire flashing against the night. Wick was already in motion. He moved with mechanical grace, slicing through corridors of chaos, every shot precise, every strike economical. Bodies fell silently, limbs twisting with ruthless efficiency, but civilians, a terrified courier trying to retreat into a hidden exit, remained untouched. Wick didn't pause. He intercepted an enemy advancing on Ethan, stepping into the line of fire before the shot could land. Ethan barely registered it. Wick's pistol barked twice, the attacker crumpled. Ethan's heart still thundered. The logic of their alliance wasn't in any protocol, it was pure survival. Wick didn't ask permission, he didn't debate strategy. He acted. They moved together, an uneasy tandem. Ethan covered corridors, rifles, tracking movement, issuing orders into comms that Wick ignored entirely. Wick was already inside rooms, methodically neutralizing threats while leaving traps set for the syndicate's reinforcements. Their targets were everywhere, cyber operatives hacking security, mercenaries dressed in black tactical gear, all converging on safehouses designed to be untouchable. A warehouse shook from an explosion as Wick rolled into the main atrium, trading fire with two attackers simultaneously. One lunged at him with a combat knife. Wick twisted, took the man down, caught the falling weapon, and dispatched the second attacker without missing a beat. Rainwater sprayed from a shattered skylight, painting the scene in flickering silver. Ethan ducked behind a crate as another squad fired overhead. He could see Wick moving like a phantom, eliminating threats in seconds, leaving the path clear for civilians and IMF agents alike. Ilse peeked from cover and muttered, "He's incredible." The operation escalated. Syndicate reinforcements poured in from shipping containers, side alleys, and stairwells. Drones hovered like silent vultures. Wick moved among them with uncanny foresight, adapting instantly to changes, guiding Ethan and Ilse through ambush after ambush without a word. At one point, Ethan miscalculated a path, stepping into an exposed corridor. A bullet slammed into the container next to him, ricocheting, splinters flying. Wick was there before the second shot landed, driving Ethan behind him with a shoulder push, returning fire without hesitation. Ethan's eyes met Wick's for a split second, acknowledgement, not gratitude. There was no time. They reached the central vault, where the syndicate was attempting to seize encrypted assets, currency flows, and protected contracts. Wick moved silently through the chaos, taking down 3 mercenaries at once, leaving Ethan free to secure the vault's terminal. Ilsa provided cover, but the rhythm of survival was dictated by Wick's movements, fluid and uncompromising. The storm outside was relentless. Water leaked through broken windows, adding a sinister hiss to the sounds of gunfire, shouted commands, and the occasional groan of the wounded. Yet amidst the chaos, Wick operated with a brutal calm, an anchor in a sea of violence. Finally, the last attacker fell, the vault secured. Silence reclaimed the port, broken only by distant thunder and the soft patter of rain. Wick leaned against a crate, catching his breath, and retrieved a fallen gold coin from the puddle, turning it over in his gloved hand with the precision of a craftsman. Ethan approached, rifle lowered, adrenaline still spiking. "You didn't have to save me," he said, voice rough. Wick's eyes met his, no smile, no acknowledgement, just the faintest tilt of the head. "You would have been in the way," he said. Then, without waiting for a response, he melted into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had arrived. Ethan exhaled, gripping his weapon tighter. For the first time, he realized the scale of the alliance, temporary, fragile, and dictated by necessity alone. The IMF had survived tonight, but only because a man who answered to no one had decided the rules didn't apply. Outside, the rain continued to fall, turning Istanbul's streets into mirrors reflecting fleeting lights. Somewhere in the darkness, Wick's figure vanished, leaving Ethan with the unshakable awareness that the line between ally and adversary had just been rewritten. And somewhere in the city, syndicate networks recalculated. Their target hadn't just survived. They had survived because of a ghost who refused to answer to any mission. The night in Prague was thick with fog, curling around street lamps like smoke. Cobblestones gleamed wet, reflecting the golden halos of light as vehicles pattered past. Ethan Hunt and his team moved cautiously through an abandoned industrial district, rifles raised, scanning every shadowed doorway. The city had grown quiet after Wick's last strike, but the tension in the air felt heavier than any storm. Ilsa Faust walked a few steps ahead of Ethan, eyes darting to corners and alleyways. "I don't like this," she muttered under her breath, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of distant traffic. "We're working with a man who doesn't extract. He eliminates. Period." Ethan didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on the building ahead, a warehouse complex seemingly abandoned, though surveillance had confirmed heavy enemy movement inside. Wick was already inside, no hesitation, no plan, just his instinct and his gun. Ethan had learned to follow protocol. Wick followed none. Benji trailed slightly behind, gripping his laptop in one hand, a compact sidearm in the other. "You know," he said nervously, "I used to think the weirdest part of IMF ops was disguises or drones. Now it's him. He's a walking variable. I can't predict what he's going to do next." Ilsa's sharp exhale cut through the fog. "Predictability is how people survive," she said, "and he doesn't survive by following anyone's rules." Inside the warehouse, Wick had already set a perimeter. 3 men, mercenaries backed by a rogue intelligence syndicate, crept toward a storage aisle, unaware that they were moving into a gauntlet. Wick's movements were precise and fluid. One man went down silently with a knife to the throat, another with a single gunshot through the temple, all without alerting the third. Outside, Ethan observed through thermal goggles, heart tight. He's effective, Ethan said quietly. But every time he acts, we're cutting deeper into their infrastructure. Collateral will increase. Ilsa's eyes narrowed. Collateral is already rising, and he doesn't care. Benji's tablet chimed with encrypted chatter. He frowned, fingers flying across the screen. Something's off, he said. I'm picking up messages that aren't coming through standard IMF channels. Someone is talking. Behind your back, Ethan. Ethan paused, glancing at his team. Who? Benji hesitated. I don't know, not yet. But it's coordinated, and it's silent, like someone is choosing what to tell and what to hide. Ilsa stepped closer to Ethan, voice lower. We're seeing fractures. You think Wicks is the only one unaccountable, but look around. This alliance is fragile. Morale is already splitting. If someone keeps secrets from you, that's worse than any mercenary firing at us. Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm aware. He turned toward the warehouse door. Through the steel mesh, he saw Wick dispatching another attacker with cold precision, moving with deadly inevitability. There was no hesitation, no extraction, only completion. Rain began to seep through the cracked roof, dripping onto crates stacked with weapons and sensitive equipment. Wick's silhouette moved through the haze, a ghost among shadows, unaffected by the weather or the law. Benji tapped his tablet frantically. Ethan, I've traced some comms. Looks like someone's deliberately avoiding your frequency. They're feeding info directly to another node. I can't decrypt it fast enough to tell who. Ethan glanced at Ilsa. You knew? I suspected, she said, but suspicion doesn't stop it. Only attention does. The warehouse erupted in sudden motion. Wick had triggered a hidden trap, forcing the last remaining syndicate operatives into a choke point. Shots rang out, echoing off metal and concrete, and for a moment it was just Wick, calm, calculating, lethal. Outside, Ethan realized the growing tension in his own team mirrored the chaos within. Loyalties were splintering, not to him, not to the IMF, but to principle, to survival, and now to the ghost, who didn't answer to anyone. Benji whispered, voice trembling. Someone's keeping secrets. From you and from the team. It's not just Wick we have to worry about. Ethan's eyes hardened, scanning the fog-laden streets. He knew it wasn't betrayal yet, but it was approaching. The fractures inside his team, small at first, could become lethal if left unchecked. Wick stepped out of the shadows, rain cascading off his shoulders, gun lowered, expression unreadable. He didn't look at Ethan. He didn't need to. His presence alone was a reminder. The rules had changed, and nothing, not loyalty, not protocol, not even survival, was guaranteed. Ethan exhaled slowly, already calculating the next moves, already knowing one thing with certainty. The mission had just become as dangerous from within as it was from the enemy outside. Somewhere in the fog and shadows, a decision was being made, silent, untraceable, a secret kept, and when it was revealed, it would change everything. The first message arrived on a darkened terminal in Langley just after midnight. Red banners flashed across encrypted channels. Asset identified, high-value target, government-backed. Ethan Hunt's eyes narrowed as he read. The pattern was unmistakable. Coordinates, aliases, even facial composites stitched together from surveillance streams, all pointing to a single man. John Wick. Benji's voice crackled over the secure line. They're serious. This isn't the old bounty system. These are sanctioned operations. CIA, MI6, Mossad combined. They basically reopened the ledger. Ethan didn't move. Outside, the city of Vienna slept beneath thick clouds, rain pattering on asphalt like soft gunfire. The safe house felt fragile, temporary, like a sandcastle waiting for a tide. Ilse Faust paced along the windowsill, rifle slung loosely over her shoulder. Sanctioned? She asked, disbelief edged in her tone. Governments are offering contracts on him? That's unprecedented. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. His mind was already running through every possible contingency, every extraction plan, every safe route Wick might use. And now everyone who counts knows his face, his patterns, his history. The world just leveled the playing field and put themselves on one side of it. Benji scrolled frantically, his fingers flying across the screen. Ethan, they're mobilizing. Teams are converging on every known continental route. Assets in Paris, London, Istanbul, they're compromised. Wick's movement is predictable only because he's forced to adapt constantly. Ethan stood leaning over the table, eyes flicking across the network maps, blueprints, and satellite feeds. He felt the weight of it, the chain reaction Wick's existence was triggering. Every corner of the globe where assassins, assets, and operatives moved silently was now a battlefield in the making. Ilse's voice was sharp. And us, she asked? We're still trying to help him, right? Ethan didn't answer immediately. The thought of Wick moving alone against an entire planetary intelligence apparatus gnawed at him. He'd seen what Wick could do, he'd witnessed it firsthand. But this was different. Every move now carried consequences far beyond street-level skirmishes. Every ally, every courier, every safe house could be exposed simply by proximity. The terminal buzzed again. A feed popped up. Images of Wick in Berlin, Rotterdam, Istanbul, each overlaid with the logos of government agencies, the word wanted blinking in bold red. Civilians in adjacent areas had already been evacuated or left unaware. A single mistake, a misfire, and hundreds could die. Benji swallowed hard. Ethan, he's about to become the most hunted man alive, literally. Every resource, every drone, every operative, they're all focused on him. Ethan ran a hand over his face, rain streaks from the window reflecting across the room. And helping him, he let the words hang. Ilse knew the implication without him finishing. Means the risk spreads, she said, voice tight, almost a whisper. To us, to innocents, to anyone standing near him. Outside, a soft hum grew, the distant whine of UAV slicing through the night. Ethan turned toward the window. He could see them faintly in the clouds, sensors scanning, pinpointing, calculating. There was no mistake. They were hunting a ghost, made real. Ethan crouched by the terminal again, scanning the data streams. Every safe route Wick had used, every extraction point, every weak link in the continental infrastructure, exposed. His chest tightened with the realization that this wasn't a mission anymore. It was a race against time, against systems designed to erase someone faster than he could react. A sudden alert lit the screen, a live feed from an alley in Vienna. Wick moved into frame, coat soaked, pistol low. Rain ran down his hair, blending with blood and shadow. One operative rounded the corner, automatic raised. Wick pivoted, the shot precise, final. But even he couldn't avoid the eyes of the world now. The relentless focus of government agencies that saw him as both threat and commodity. Ethan's fingers hovered over the console, heart pounding. Every plan he could conceive now carried a multiplier of risk. Every attempt to help Wick could expose his own team, compromise the IMF, and pull entire cities into the crossfire. Ilse stepped beside him, eyes on the screen. You know what this means, don't you? Ethan nodded, slowly, deliberately. We're no longer just watching him survive. We're watching him fight an army the world has sanctioned to kill him. And if we step in, he paused, voice tight, we could doom everyone around us. A distant thunderclap punctuated the revelation. Somewhere, Wick's silhouette vanished into the shadows, leaving only the storm, the city, and a single, unavoidable truth. Being known had a price. And now, the cost was global. The skyline of Madrid glowed under a bruised sunset, orange streaking into violet. But beneath it, the streets were dark and unwelcoming. Wick moved like a shadow, slipping through alleys and service corridors with the precision of a predator and the patience of a surgeon. Every step was deliberate. Every target had a purpose. He entered a nondescript building in the city's financial district, its exterior unremarkable, a facade hiding the arteries of the world's hidden economy. Brokers, handlers, intermediaries, men and women who trafficked information, contracts, and influence were inside, confident in their networks, confident in their untouchability. Confidence, Wick knew, was the first casualty of precision. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, security cameras swept methodically, automated doors clicked and whirred. Wick paused in the shadows, watching a convoy of 3 men move toward a secure elevator. Each man carried a briefcase heavy with encrypted ledgers and black market codes that kept entire assassins' networks alive. Wick's eyes narrowed. A single breath, a single movement. By the time the first alarm would have sounded, 3 bodies had fallen silently into the dark, their briefcases abandoned, their connections severed. Wick moved through the building methodically, a phantom erasing the lines that connected power and profit. Every kill, every sabotage was executed with surgical precision, leaving no trace, no collateral damage beyond those who had chosen to thrive on control. Outside, rain began to fall. Streetlights reflected off wet asphalt in fractured patterns. Wick emerged from a side exit, briefcase in hand, and slipped into the shadows just as a team of enforcers arrived, alerted by delayed sensors. He didn't stop. He never stopped. The city became a chessboard. Every safe house, every courier hub, every intermediary office was a piece to be removed. In London, similar scenes unfolded. High-rise offices emptied as Wick's unseen hand struck at the veins of power. Servers were corrupted, meetings disrupted, assets seized or destroyed. Analysts working for government agencies, syndicates, and clandestine brokers found themselves suddenly powerless, scrambling to understand why the network that had kept them untouchable was dissolving in hours. Ethan Hunt monitored the movement from a safe house overlooking the Thames. Screens flickered with feeds of smoke rising over Madrid, London, Istanbul. "He's burning the middle," Ethan muttered, voice tight. "Every intermediary who trades in control, gone. The system's collapsing." Benji's hands trembled over the keyboard. "You're seeing it too, right? The cascading effect? Safehouses are exposed, contracts are void. Everything the high table and other networks built is unraveling. This isn't just chaos, it's systemic collapse." Ilse Faust rested against the wall, eyes fixed on the feeds. "And the governments are noticing every missing link, every disrupted asset. They'll trace it. And when they do, Wick will be the epicenter." From a satellite feed above Berlin, a blinking red icon appeared over the city. The message came through encrypted channels to IMF command. "Unauthorized asset is escalating. Threat level, planetary." Ethan's stomach tightened. He'd seen the signs before: volatile operations, unstoppable forces. But this was unprecedented. Wick wasn't targeting individuals out of vengeance. He was targeting the infrastructure of control itself. Every connection broken widened the gap between law, crime, and order. Benji whispered, eyes wide. "They're declaring him a planetary threat. All assets, all operatives, authorized to engage, contain, or terminate. This is global." Rain pounded harder on the safe house roof, drumming in a chaotic rhythm, as if the world itself acknowledged the upheaval. Wick was already several countries away, moving through networks no one could predict, leaving the foundations of the hidden economy in ruin. Ethan's jaw clenched. Helping him isn't just dangerous anymore. It's suicidal. Every mission we've ever undertaken is now collateral if we align with him. Ilsa's eyes met his, sharp and unwavering. And if we don't? He looked at the cascading feeds, cities flickering with smoke and disruption, bureaucracies faltering, syndicates scrambling. Then the world continues under the illusion of control, until it collapses anyway, only slower. Far away in the shadows between continents, Wick paused briefly atop a rain-slick rooftop. He looked over the city below, hands wet, coat clinging to his frame, and inhaled the storm-soaked air. The middle had burned, the structures of power toppled or destabilized, and now the entire planet's underworld was scrambling to adapt. Somewhere, IMF command was calculating their response. Entire fleets of agents, drones, and satellites were now focused on a single man. One man who didn't answer to orders. And Wick, silent and unseen, moved again, disappearing into the night with the cold clarity of a man who had made a decision no protocol could stop. Freedom would only come when every system, every intermediary, every rule was burned to ashes. The warehouse in Hamburg shuddered under the weight of wind and rain. Water dripped through the fractured skylights, pooling across the cracked concrete floor. Crates marked with shipping codes were scattered like fallen soldiers, and somewhere in the distance, the echo of engines and sirens rose and fell like a tide. Ethan Hunt crouched behind a steel pillar, breath steady, eyes scanning the shadows. His earpiece crackled with a single sharp command. "Contain him, alive or dead. You know the protocol." The voice was firm, non-negotiable. It was IMF command, their tone stripped of hesitation, the kind that never questioned consequences. Across the warehouse, Wick emerged from darkness, coat soaked, gun lowered but ready. He moved, with fluid certainty, every step deliberate. There were no traps, no hesitations, only intent. The room itself seemed to contract around him, shadows clinging to his silhouette. Ilsa, Faust, and Benji flanked Ethan, rifles ready, but their expressions betrayed unease. They knew what was coming, knew the collision that had been simmering since Prague, since Istanbul. Two rogues, each unbound by protocol, philosophies irreconcilable, now in the same space. Ethan spoke first, voice low but carrying authority. "John, it doesn't have to be this way. Extraction, safe passage, orders." Wick didn't flinch. His eyes, dark and unreadable, met Ethan's across the expanse of the warehouse. "Orders?" Wick's tone was calm, flat. "I've lived my life following none. I've built nothing that answers to someone else's stamp. I don't get in cages, Ethan. Not now, not ever." The rain rattled the broken skylights above, a relentless percussion. Ethan took a careful step forward. "You think freedom comes from destroying the system, but it doesn't. You're destabilizing every safe house, every network. The world doesn't have room for ghosts like you." "Ghosts?" Wick's lip twitched. "I'm alive, that's all that matters." He shifted, pistol raised lightly, not a threat but a statement. "You want me in custody. You'll have to shoot me, and I promise I won't make it easy." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had always navigated chaos, but this was different. This was not a mission. This was an inevitability. Their eyes locked. Two men who had survived impossible odds. Two philosophies at odds with the same world. Benji whispered from behind cover, voice tight. "Ethan, he's not bluffing." Ilsa stepped closer, voice soft but firm. This isn't a negotiation anymore. It's a collision. Be ready. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath. Rain pattered in staccato on the concrete, punctuating the tension. Shadows stretched, clung and shifted, as if the building itself waited for the first move. Ethan exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle just slightly, fingers brushing the grip. "I don't want this," he said, almost to himself. "But orders aren't suggestions." Wick's response was a step forward, deliberate, measured. Rain slid down his face, mixing with the grime and streaks of blood from prior engagements. "I don't work for anyone," he said, voice cutting through the air like a blade, "and I don't answer to anyone's mission." The distance between them closed slowly, tension coiling like a spring ready to snap. Neither spoke again. Guns were drawn, not with anger, but with inevitability, their philosophies leaving no room for compromise. A sudden thunderclap reverberated through the warehouse, drowning out the soft click of safeties disengaging. Wick shifted, shoulder back, eyes locked on Ethan's every micro movement. Ethan mirrored him, rifle steady, pulse controlled. Neither flinched. Benji's fingers hovered over his tablet, eyes wide. This is it. They're going to... Ilsa put a hand on his shoulder. "Watch. Survive. But don't interfere unless necessary." The room felt smaller now. Each shadow, each reflection off puddled water, each flicker of light from distant neon became a line drawn between two men who had survived because they refused to follow. They were mirrors of chaos, inevitabilities converging on one point. Ethan's mind raced. Every tactic, every maneuver, every extraction plan he had ever executed suddenly felt obsolete. Wick was not a mission to be completed. He was a force to be endured, or neutralized. Wick stepped another pace forward, slow, deliberate. The barrel of his gun gleamed faintly in the dim light. Ethan mirrored him, pulse steady, eyes unblinking. Outside, the storm raged harder, the sound of rain hammering against metal, echoing like distant gunfire. Inside, time seemed suspended. Two rogues, one world. Collision imminent. Then, as lightning flared across the broken skylights, their eyes met one last time. Neither flinched, neither yielded. Guns were drawn, philosophies were locked. And the first move, inevitable as it was, waited only for the storm to judge who would act first. The rain fell in torrents over Rome, hammering against marble and asphalt, turning the cobblestones of the city into slick mirrors of fractured light. The Continental, ancient, secret, and untouchable, stood at the center of a quiet square, lanterns flickering like fragile beacons against the storm. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the scent of wet stone and burning incense mingling with the metallic tang of recent blood. John Wick moved through the lobby with a measured precision, eyes scanning the grand architecture as if calculating angles for combat that hadn't yet arrived. This was no ordinary hotel. Every corridor, every door, every secret passage had been designed to protect neutrality, to enforce rules no government dared break. But neutrality, Wick knew, was only a shield, and shields could be shattered. At the main desk, a clerk looked up, eyes wide, hands frozen over a ledger. "Mr. Wick, you shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trembling, as the first intruders breached the courtyard outside. Wick didn't speak. He simply pivoted, pistol in hand, muscles coiled, ready. Through the rain-streaked windows, shadows moved. Black-clad operatives, syndicate mercenaries, even rogue government agents, converging simultaneously on the Continental's gates. No announcement, no warning, just inevitability. Ethan Hunt arrived moments later, sliding through the side entrance, wet coat clinging, eyes scanning for targets, for Wick, for civilians. "This is it," he said, voice low but tense. The last neutral ground. Once they breach, there's nothing left to protect. Wick didn't respond, only moved. The first intruder went down silently, a single bullet between the eyes, body slumping to the polished marble floor. Another tried to circle him from the side. Wick pivoted, firing twice, the shots echoing like percussion through the lobby. Yet even as he struck, civilians were evacuating down hidden stairwells, guided by discreet signs only a continental guest would know. Ilsa Faust and Benji entered behind Ethan, rifles drawn but careful, aware that every action here was measured against the fragile rules that had preserved the balance for centuries. Ilsa's eyes flicked to Wick, noting his methodical precision. He's saving as many as he can, but he's burning through their protection, she whispered. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning illuminated the courtyard as government drones hovered overhead, scanning, targeting, marking. The Continental's perimeter, once inviolate, was now under assault from every corner. Mechanized, armed, relentless. Wick moved through it like a shadow, intercepting, eliminating, never hesitating. Ethan realized the truth in that moment. No system, no matter how sacred, could survive against a force like Wick, or the world's response to him. The intruders' combined assault was crushing, overwhelming. Every safe house, every hidden elevator, every clandestine tunnel was compromised. Neutrality itself was dying. A blinding flash of lightning revealed Wick atop the main staircase, silhouette framed by fractured light and broken chandeliers. He fired at 3 operatives attempting to flank him, pivoted, and then, with a single measured kick, sent one crashing into a wall. Marble cracked under impact. Ethan ducked instinctively, watching the ballet of violence unfold. Benji's voice trembled in Ethan's earpiece. They've got him surrounded. Everywhere. There's no extraction, no safe path. He's walking into oblivion. Wick descended the stairs, moving toward the central atrium where civilians had been ushered. Each shot, each movement was calculated to minimize collateral while maximizing the destruction of the invading forces. The lobby was chaos, shattering glass, ricocheting bullets, overturned furniture, the scent of smoke and blood mixing with incense. Yet, through it all, Wick's focus remained absolute. Ethan approached cautiously, rifle trained but lowered slightly. "John, you don't have to do this alone," he called over the storm. Wick's gaze didn't falter. He holstered his pistol briefly, eyes scanning the remaining intruders, calculating, always calculating. "Alone," he said, voice calm, almost detached, "because if I fail, everyone dies anyway. There's no coming back from this. No rules left to follow. No neutrality to shield the innocent." The final breach erupted as doors splintered, drones hovered menacingly, and operatives poured in from every side. The last protections, the last safe walls, shattered beneath the combined weight of shadow and storm. Wick's eyes hardened. He knew the Continental, every rule it upheld, every life it had silently safeguarded, was gone, destroyed. Ethan took a careful step closer. Then what happens now? Wick's hand rested briefly on the railing, the storm washing over him, his jaw set, eyes dark. "Now," he said quietly, "we erase everything, or it erases us first." The rain intensified, cascading through broken skylights, splashing across marble floors littered with bodies and debris. Wick descended into the chaos once more, a man without mercy, a ghost without neutrality. And as the last protective barriers fell, Ethan understood the unthinkable truth. There was no going back. The rules were dead. The world's shadows were exposed. Only erasure remained, and Wick would deliver it or be consumed in the attempt. The streets of Vienna were slick with rain, reflecting fractured neon from shuttered storefronts. Smoke rose in curling columns from overturned vehicles, the scent of burning rubber and ozone thick in the air. Wick moved through the chaos, coat clinging to his frame, pistol held low but ready, each footstep precise against the uneven cobblestones. Behind him, the final echoes of the Continental's fall still hummed in memory. Broken marble, shattered glass, the ghosts of neutrality destroyed. Ethan Hunt moved beside him, rain streaming down his face, rifle held loosely but alert. Ilsa, Faust and Benji covered the rear, eyes scanning for threats, for exits, for anyone who might take the opportunity to strike. The city itself felt alive with danger, every shadow potentially hiding an operative, every alley a trap waiting to spring. Then, from the corner of Ethan's eye, movement, subtle, deliberate, human. Luther, one of the IMF's field operatives, had veered ahead, intercepting a group of approaching mercenaries before they could spot Wick. His posture was tense but controlled. He carried no illusions of escape, only the certainty of duty. Wick's eyes flicked to Luther, noticing the split-second decision. No orders had demanded it. No protocol could enforce such a choice. Yet Luther threw himself into the path of danger anyway. 3 attackers converged on him simultaneously, weapons raised, teeth bared in the certainty of their advantage. In an instant, Luther acted. He unleashed a flurry of suppressing fire, buying Wick precious seconds to move, to gain cover, to survive. Bullets tore through his chest and shoulder, but he held the line long enough for Wick to pivot, slide behind a parked car, and aim with deadly efficiency. The shots rang out in quick succession. 2 mercenaries fell, a third limping away, leaving behind the echo of a life paid willingly. Luther crumpled, rain cascading over him, the life slipping from his hands as easily as water through a sieve. His gaze met Wick's for a fleeting second. No fear, no complaint, only acceptance. Wick froze mid-step. Time seemed to dilate. The storm outside became a muted roar, the rain slowing to a hiss in his ears. He lowered his gun, knuckles white. Sacrifice, not demanded by law, not enforced by orders, but given freely, stuck in his chest with the weight of an anchor. Ethan knelt beside Luther, checking vitals, his expression taut. "He's gone," Ethan said quietly, voice barely carrying over the storm. "He made the choice for you, John. For all of us." Wick didn't respond immediately. His eyes scanned the street, the rooftops, every shadow. Every instinct screamed at him to move, to survive. But the image of Luther, silent, unwavering, a human shield without ceremony, etched itself into his mind. Ilsa's hand rested on his shoulder briefly. "It's what happens when we step into chaos," she said softly. "Sometimes the rules aren't enough. Sometimes someone has to choose to stand." Benji's voice trembled from behind cover. "Ethan, Wick, we can't linger. More are coming, but we saw it, didn't we? He didn't have to die." Wick's fingers tightened around his pistol, knuckles whitening. He exhaled slowly, shoulders shifting, as if absorbing more than the storm could pour down. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Not to Ethan, not to Ilsa, but to himself. A decision had formed in the quiet after the sacrifice. He moved forward, but differently this time. Not with the single-minded ferocity of a man erasing targets, but with intention, with weight. Every shot fired, every maneuver, every step calculated to honor what had been given freely. Not for glory, not for protocol, but for the cost someone else had chosen to bear. Ethan glanced at him, the unspoken question in his eyes. Wick's jaw tightened, expression unreadable. But the message was clear. The mission, the survival, the path forward. Now it carried a personal reckoning. The storm seemed to echo his resolve. Wind howling through narrow alleys, water rushing past overturned cars, and Wick vanished into the chaos of Vienna, moving with purpose, heavier than any order. Outside the immediate firefight, the city felt smaller, tighter, every corner a reminder that no one was invincible. No sacrifice remembered by monuments or plaques, only by choices made in the silence between gunfire. And as Wick disappeared into the rain-soaked night, the team realized something that hadn't existed before. John Wick's decisions were no longer just about survival or vengeance. They were shaped by the sacrifices of those who had chosen to act without demand, without recognition, and that truth would change everything to come. The night over Prague was a canvas of shadows and silver, the Vltava reflecting fractured streetlights like shards of broken glass. Rain drummed softly on rooftops, washing away the residue of chaos left by Wick's previous strikes. But the storm outside felt minor compared to the tempest gathering inside the safe house. Wick stood at the center of the dimly lit room, coat damp, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes dark and unblinking. A single lamp cast long, angular shadows across the walls, stretching the shapes of maps, satellite feeds, and shredded intelligence dossiers scattered across the table. Every line traced routes, safe houses, operatives, an entire ecosystem of control now reduced to coordinates and possibility. Ethan Hunt leaned over the table, hands resting lightly on the cool metal, scanning the network diagrams. "You're talking about erasing everything," he said, voice tight, almost a whisper, though urgency sharpened each syllable. "Every system, every intermediary, every agent, every safe house. You mean globally?" Wick's gaze didn't waver. "Not just intermediaries, not just safe houses. Everything that allows these systems to operate. The brokers, the financial networks, the chains of influence. Burn it all. Collapse the framework entirely. Only then does anyone stand a chance at freedom." Ilse, standing near the wall, flinched at the scope of it. "You're talking about destabilizing entire nations' intelligence operations. The collateral, civilian and operative alike, would be catastrophic. Even if it's precise, even if it's controlled." Wick's hands hovered over the maps, tracing lines like a conductor orchestrating an unseen symphony. "Controlled," he said quietly, almost to himself, "is a lie. Systems like this never stay clean. They're built on leverage, on coercion, on fear. If we don't end it, they end lives for the sake of stability anyway." Ethan ran a hand through his wet hair, turning to face him. "You realize there's no extraction in this plan. There's no clean exit. This isn't a mission with a safe house at the end. This is global collapse. You're asking everyone to gamble their lives on your code of justice." Wick's eyes locked with Ethan's, unwavering. "And yet, every day they operate, they gamble with thousands of lives without conscience. I'm offering a chance to reset the board, but yes, no extraction, no safety. Only consequence." Benji shifted uneasily near a window, staring out at the rain-slick streets below. "Even if we survive the first wave, the second, the third, the ripple effects, societies, governments, agencies, they won't forgive it. People will die because of this, John. You know that." Wick's gaze softened. Not entirely, but for a fraction of a second. The weight of his world intersected with the reality Ethan and the IMF lived in. "I know. That's why someone has to decide to act," he said, his hands clenched briefly. "I've seen what hesitation costs. I've seen what obedience costs. I refuse to let the system dictate its own moral calculus anymore." Ethan's chest tightened. He had led impossible missions, risked lives, and navigated betrayals, but this was unprecedented. They weren't stopping a rogue operative or intercepting nuclear codes. They were annihilating the very mechanisms of global intelligence and shadow operations, rewriting power itself. Ilsa's voice cut through the tension, calm but edged with warning. And if it fails, or if it succeeds partially, the world won't just rebuild, it will retaliate. Systems will fracture, alliances will crumble, and chaos will reign unchecked. Wick's hand traced a line across Istanbul, London, Vienna, cities where networks had already begun to falter. Better unchecked chaos than deliberate oppression, he said. Better to burn the tree than let it grow poisoned fruit forever. Ethan stared at him, unblinking. The rain against the window sounded like a metronome, marking the countdown to inevitability. If we do this, there's no coming back, no redemption, no extraction. No one walks away clean. Wick's jaw tightened. I never walk away clean. You know that, Ethan. But the board must be cleared. And if I'm the one to do it, then I will, with or without anyone else. The storm outside intensified, thunder rolling over the city like the drums of judgment. Lightning illuminated the maps and schematics, flickering across Wick's determined face. The room seemed suspended, heavy with the weight of choice. Ethan exhaled slowly, realizing the inevitability in Wick's words. Then it begins, he said finally, voice low, carrying the resignation of a man who understood both cost and the necessity. No extraction, no mercy, only the plan. Wick nodded once sharply. Only the plan, he echoed. And with that, the final mission, the endgame that could not be reversed, began its silent, unstoppable march into motion. The night sky over Budapest was ripped apart by fire and lightning, a city caught in the collision of every shadow force left in the world. Streetlights flickered and died as armored vehicles roared through cobblestone streets, their headlights cutting swaths of white across walls slick with rain. Helicopters circled overhead, searchlights swinging, tracing figures darting between overturned cars and fractured alleyways. Gunfire rattled like thunder, echoing through narrow streets, bouncing off ancient stone facades, blending with the storm. Ethan Hunt slid behind a battered van, breath heavy, eyes scanning the chaos. Ilsa Faust crouched beside him, rifle steady, while Benji tapped frantically on a tablet, feeding intel from every drone and satellite orbiting the city. The streets were alive with violence. Mercenary battalions in black armor, rogue IMF squads, assassins from forgotten networks, every faction converging in a single deadly heartbeat. They've brought everything, Ethan muttered, voice tight. Every gun, every operative still standing. This is total war. Wick moved somewhere ahead, a shadow among shadows, his coat flaring as he pivoted, firing with unerring precision. One moment he was on the street, dispatching 3 mercenaries before they even realized he existed. The next, he was atop a crumbling ledge, rifle leveled, dropping a sniper with a single shot. Each movement was fluid, choreographed by instinct honed over decades, yet nothing about him suggested theatrics, only lethal efficiency. Ilsa's gaze followed him. He's everywhere, she whispered, voice tinged with awe and fear. How does one man do this? Benji tapped rapidly. Sensors don't pick him up, comms don't track him. It's like he's a ghost woven into the storm. Ethan cursed under his breath, eyes scanning the battlefield. This isn't just Wick. This is every operative, every assassin, every intelligence cell in the world fighting over the same prize, control, and we're in the middle. Down the street, a convoy of armored trucks barreled forward, mercenaries unloading with systematic precision. Explosions rocked the square, sending shards of concrete into the air. Civilians had been evacuated or fled, but the air was thick with smoke, acrid and metallic. The roar of engines, the staccato of automatic fire, the clatter of steel on steel, all collided into a cacophony that threatened to swallow reason itself. Ethan sprinted across a collapsed section of street, diving behind an overturned tram as a hail of bullets shredded the metal around him. "Ilsa, flank left! Benji, cover the rear!" From above, Wick dropped silently onto the tram roof, landing without a sound. He fired downward, 2 more mercenaries dropping before they could react. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his silhouette for a brief moment. A ghost framed in fractured light. Then, as if swallowed by the storm itself, he vanished again, leaving no trace but bodies and broken rifles. Benji's voice cracked over the earpiece. He's gone. I don't... How does he... Where? Ethan's jaw tightened. He's not gone. He's never gone. He's ahead, behind, inside every shadow you're looking at. And right now, he's the only reason anyone survives this mess. The fighting intensified. Snipers fired from rooftops, ricochets pinging across the street. Drones swooped low, releasing grenades that ignited fires across the square. Every operative in every uniform and creed collided like tectonic plates, carving destruction through the heart of the city. Yet Wick was nowhere to be seen. Civilians had vanished. Ethan moved cautiously, tracking the pattern of bodies falling, the direction of gunfire, the subtle shifts in chaos, trying to anticipate where Wick might strike next, or if he had already slipped through the storm entirely. A sudden explosion rocked the northern end of the square, throwing a wall of fire and debris into the sky. Ethan shielded his eyes, heart racing. When the smoke cleared, Wick's path of destruction had already erased the threat, but he himself was gone, vanished without a sound, leaving only the echo of certainty behind him. Ilsa's whisper cut through the chaos. He's disappeared. Ethan exhaled slowly, pulse still hammering. Into the storm, he muttered, and somewhere in that storm, he's still moving. Rain poured harder, washing blood, soot, and fire across the streets. The battle continued, a war without mercy, without pause. And through it all, Wick had become something more than a man, an unstoppable variable, a ghost who couldn't be caged, whose disappearance reshaped every plan, every strategy, every hope. Ethan glanced at the storm streets, realizing the truth. The largest shadow war in modern history was underway, and John Wick wasn't just participating, he was rewriting its rules, and no one, not even the IMF, could predict where or how he would strike next. The night hung over Prague like a black velvet curtain, pierced by the flickering glow of fires still burning from the chaos of the last hours. Rain fell in sheets, washing over the city's cracked cobblestones, turning alleys into slick rivers of reflected light and shadow. Helicopter blades churned overhead, a mechanical heartbeat drumming against the storm, while distant explosions punctuated the thunder like punctuation in a sentence of violence. Ethan Hunt crouched behind a shattered stone wall, rifle in hand, chest heaving, eyes scanning the battlefield. The square ahead was a fractured mosaic of smoke, fire, and the scattered bodies of every faction, mercenaries, rogue IMF units, assassins, and operatives alike, locked in a war that no one had authorized but everyone had been drawn into. Every shadow carried a threat. Every shadow might hide Wick. Ilsa Faust slid beside him, drenched, coat plastered to her frame. "He's moving faster than we can track," she said, a voice taut with exhaustion. "If he completes the collapse, there's no going back." Ethan's jaw clenched. He had seen impossible missions before, faced impossible odds, but this was more than survival, more than strategy. This was morality itself, stretched over a city like a taut wire. Protect the systems, preserve the lives of the innocents now, but risk letting the networks rebuild and enslave again. Or step aside, let Wick burn everything to ash, and gamble that the future could be freer, more just, even if countless lives were lost tonight. Benji's voice crackled through the comms. "Ethan, Command is screaming for extraction. You know what they'll do if you—" "Not now," Ethan muttered, cutting him off. His eyes shifted to the central plaza. Wick moved there, a ghost in the storm, his silhouette framed by flickering streetlights and the glow of fires. The man wasn't just fighting, he was orchestrating the collapse with the precision of a master strategist. Buildings crumbled under precise strikes, armored vehicles erupted in controlled detonations, and every operative who survived the first wave vanished into the storm of his design. Ethan's mind raced, calculating possibilities, predicting consequences. Save the current lives, maintain order, enforce the rules, agents, civilians, everyone safe for the moment, or allow Wick to finish, to obliterate the entire shadow network, erasing the infrastructure that enslaved lives in secrecy, but at the cost of the present. Ilsa's eyes caught his, searching for hesitation, for guidance. "We can't stop him without killing him, but if we let him go, the world won't understand what you chose." Ethan exhaled slowly, water dripping from his hair into his eyes. He lowered his rifle slightly, heart hammering in rhythm with the storm outside. Command had drilled him, trained him, told him every decision existed within protocol, every action measured against rules that ensured survival and control. But the rules didn't account for a man like John Wick, a force untethered from order, untethered from control. A distant explosion illuminated Wick in a brief, fiery silhouette. Ethan could see the precision, the relentless logic in every motion. He wasn't just killing. He was dismantling the very architecture of power. And with every strike, the choice became more urgent, more irreversible. Ethan's hand hovered over the communicator, the link to IMF command buzzing insistently, but he didn't press it. Instead, he exhaled, eyes narrowing, jaw setting. The storm around him seemed to pause for a heartbeat, acknowledging the weight of the decision. He rose from cover, movement deliberate enough that Ilsa and Benji noticed, hesitant but unwilling to argue. Ethan Hunt, once the emblem of IMF precision, the enforcer of rules, made his choice. He would let Wick finish. A gust of wind whipped through the square, carrying smoke, rain, and the acrid scent of fire. Ethan moved forward, stepping over debris, past bodies, past chaos toward the center of the battlefield. The decision was final, absolute, a breach of protocol, a violation of every principle he had ever upheld. Benji's voice was barely audible over the storm. "Ethan, you're breaking the rules." Ethan glanced back, rain streaming down his face, eyes cold but resolute. "I'm choosing the world we deserve, not the one they demand we preserve." The final gunfire echoed around them. Wick's form moved like liquid shadow, disappearing between smoke and rain, yet Ethan knew he was heading toward the culmination of his plan. No extraction, no safety net, only the inevitable collapse of the systems that had enslaved billions. As Ethan stepped fully into the storm, breaking the IMF's final rule, he felt the weight of the choice settle in his chest. Lives now saved, perhaps, but at the cost of everything familiar, everything controlled. And in that instant, amidst fire, rain, and chaos, the future shifted irreversibly, because one man chose to trust another, to let the rules die in order to give the world a chance at true freedom. The dawn over Prague broke like shattered glass, pale light glinting off rain-slicked rooftops and puddles that still carried the blackened reflection of night's chaos. Smoke curled from scattered fires, drifting lazily into the sky, while the acrid scent of burned asphalt and melted steel clung to the streets. Silence fell unevenly, punctuated by the occasional creak of wreckage settling, a distant siren, the muted groan of a building straining under damage. John Wick moved through it all with a predator's grace, coat damp and plastered to his body, boots silent on debris-strewn cobblestones. His face was streaked with soot and rain, eyes sharp and unblinking, scanning every shadow even when the streets were empty. Every step he took left an impression on the world, but every step carried a cost only he could measure. Ethan Hunt appeared on the edge of a shattered square, rifle slung loosely, gaze sweeping over the destruction. Ilsa and Benji trailed behind him, every sense alert, yet all four felt the same disquiet. The storm had ended, but its residue lingered like a wound. Wick's path was clear. The remnants of the intelligence assassin network lay in ruins. Safehouses had been destroyed, brokers eliminated, the web of control shredded to threads. Markets once secret and untouchable now existed only in memory. Wick had finished the mission, the endgame completed with precision and ferocity, yet he did not look triumphant. He looked like a man who had carried every casualty of his choice in his chest. Ethan approached cautiously, stopping a few feet from him. "It's done," he said, voice low, carrying the exhaustion of someone who had witnessed impossible decisions. "Everything you wanted. It's over." Wick's eyes didn't move from the distance. "Over?" he echoed softly. His voice was not triumph, not victory. It was neutral, carrying only the weight of what had been paid. Over isn't in the vocabulary of survival. Over is in the vocabulary of those who never had to pay for it. Ilsa stepped forward, rain dripping from her hair. "John, people will rebuild, they always do. You've broken everything now, but nothing is permanent." Wick's gaze lifted, piercing, as if seeing not them but the invisible lines that remained, the ripple effects of choices made. "Maybe, but they won't rebuild the same, and they'll never rebuild me into it." Benji's voice was tentative. "You're leaving?" Wick finally turned, coat swaying with the motion, eyes locking on Ethan's. "I never walked away before. I'm not walking away now." Ethan's mouth tightened. He knew the words carried more than a threat. They carried inevitability. Wick had completed the mission, yes, but the man himself would not submit to extraction, to oversight, to any system. The legend that haunted intelligence briefings and shadow brokers alike would vanish, but only from the world's sight. The streets remained silent as Wick moved past them, boots echoing faintly on wet stone, each step deliberate. No one pursued, no one called out. Even the storm seemed to part for him, allowing his departure to go unnoticed, almost like the city itself understood the necessity of letting him disappear. Ilsa whispered, almost to herself, "A body never found." Ethan's gaze lingered on the empty street where Wick had vanished. The realization settled like a stone in his chest. The man who had reshaped the world's hidden networks was gone, but not defeated, not captured, not mortal, in the way anyone expected. He existed now as both myth and reality, untethered from rules, untouchable by law, yet still very present in consequence. Benji shook his head, voice trembling slightly. We'll tell them he's gone, but they'll never believe it, not really." Ethan exhaled, a mixture of awe and regret. "No, he said softly. They'll never believe it. And maybe that's the point. Some legends are meant to be untraceable. Rain continued to fall, soft and unrelenting, washing the streets of blood and fire, leaving only the faint traces of what had transpired. Wick had completed the impossible, dismantled the structures of control, and vanished into a world that could no longer contain him. And somewhere beyond the broken skyline and beyond the reach of systems and spies and governments, John Wick walked alone, a man who never walked away, and whose story, untethered from the world, had no end that anyone could mark. The sun rose over Vienna in a pale, filtered light, painting the city in soft golds and greys. Streets were alive with ordinary life. Pedestrians moved briskly across cobblestone, bicycles clattered along narrow lanes, and cafe tables filled with the muted clink of cups and conversation. The scars of the past war lingered only in subtle ways, a shattered corner of a plaza still fenced off, the faint scorch marks on a bridge no one had repaired fully, and the occasional cautious glance at government buildings bristling with surveillance cameras. Ethan Hunt stood on the balcony of a modest apartment overlooking the Danube, coat pulled tight against the early chill. His eyes swept the city below with the practiced vigilance of a man who had spent decades anticipating threats that no one else saw. But today the shadows were quieter. Operatives moved openly, communications were largely unencrypted, and intelligence agencies operated without the gods in the shadows guiding or corrupting their actions. The world felt safer, but fragile, as though it had been held together with paper and hope rather than steel and strategy. Ilse Faust arrived with 2 cups of coffee, offering one without a word. Ethan took it, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Years had passed since the Prague collapse, since the world had been rewritten by decisions no one else could have made. Some wounds had healed, some had left faint scars, and some truths remained unspoken between them, carried like weights that would never fully lift. Quiet, she murmured, glancing at the street below. Almost suspiciously so. Ethan allowed a faint smile. Quiet doesn't last, he said, not in this line of work. His eyes lingered on a small cafe across the square, watching patrons go about their mornings, oblivious to the collapse and rebirth of the hidden world they could never see. The IMF was reorganized, boundaries set, oversight clear. The assassination markets had vanished, brokers gone, and yet that very absence left the world more delicate, like a glass sculpture teetering on a thin ledge. Benji, now older and slightly greyer, appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, bringing news that was mundane compared to the chaos they had once endured. Yet even here, even in civility, the ghosts of the past whispered. Agencies were operating with transparency, but whispers of rogue operatives and unknown variables persisted. Shadows had not entirely disappeared. They had simply changed their shape. Ethan sipped his coffee, eyes narrowing, as he noticed a glint at the edge of the street. A silver coin spinning idly near a gutter. He frowned, stepping closer. The coin wobbled, slowed, and landed face up. His breath caught. A familiar engraving, the continental mark, faint and worn, a symbol of a world that had existed outside law and order, a world that John Wick had burned and walked away from. Ilse leaned closer, following his gaze. That doesn't belong here, she said softly, unease creeping into her tone. Ethan picked it up carefully, rolling it between his fingers. No message, no envelope, no immediate threat. Just the coin. A relic of the man who had reshaped everything. The memory of Wick's decisions, his disappearances, his untraceable movements, returned with weight and clarity. The coin was a reminder. Even in a world that appeared peaceful, even in a world that operated openly, the consequences of choices made in the shadows endured. Benji broke the silence, voice light but tinged with caution. "You think he's back?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, and he stared at the coin, turning it over slowly. There was no signature, no indication of timing, no direct threat, only the certainty of presence. The same presence that had toppled networks, defied gods, and left the world in a precarious balance. He finally pocketed the coin, exhaling slowly. "Not back," he said. "Just reminding us he's never really gone." Ilsa's gaze followed his, understanding the weight of his words. The quiet streets of Vienna might continue for years, decades even, but the ghost of what had been, and what could return, remained alive in small tokens. Subtle signs that only those who had lived in the shadows could recognize. Ethan turned back to the river, letting the coin rest against his palm. The world was quieter now, the threats more contained, the operations open and accountable. Yet in that quiet, fragile peace, the memory of the man who refused to walk away lingered. A constant reminder that order was never permanent, and legends never truly ended. Somewhere beyond the city, beyond the rules of law and agency, Wick's presence still resonated. And in a world that believed itself safe, a familiar coin spinning in the sunlight was enough to remind those who knew the truth. The game was never over. The city of Vienna sprawled beneath a late afternoon sky, gold and grey bleeding together as sunlight caught the edges of ornate rooftops. The streets hummed with ordinary life. Trams glided silently, cafe umbrellas clattered in the wind, and pedestrians drifted past one another without awareness of the storms that had once shattered this very city. The scars of the past, charred stone, cracked concrete, a few silent memorials tucked into corners, spoke quietly of battles fought in shadows, battles that no history book would ever record. Ethan Hunt leaned against the balcony railing of a modest apartment, coat draped loosely over his shoulders, coffee cooling, forgotten in his hand. The war had ended. The networks, the hidden hierarchies, the invisible strings that had controlled lives in secret, they were gone, replaced not by order, but by a fragile equilibrium. A balance tenuous and precarious, held together by choice and memory, rather than law or system. His eyes drifted across the rooftops, scanning for movement that no longer posed a threat, yet the instinct remained. The reflex honed over decades of impossible missions, of impossible choices. He could feel it in his bones. Freedom was never free. Someone had paid, and someone had walked away, untethered by rules, untouchable by consequence. Ilsa Faust stepped beside him, quiet as a shadow, and for a long moment they watched the streets below. "It's different now," she murmured. Her voice carried the weight of observation, of years spent in the aftermath of chaos. "No one's hiding behind walls of fear or power. The systems are gone, but it's fragile." Ethan nodded, eyes narrowing slightly. "Fragile," he agreed. He could see it in the subtle tension of traffic lights, in the uniformed presence of law enforcement that now operated openly rather than in secret, in the wary but deliberate confidence of pedestrians. The city moved, alive and human, but beneath it all lay the residue of choices that had rewritten the rules of the world. Benji appeared behind them, tablet in hand, casually scrolling through open-source news reports. "You know," he said lightly, though the edge of seriousness was unmistakable, "most people will never understand what happened here. To them, the world just worked. Like nothing changed. Ethan allowed a dry smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. Because they don't see the doors that closed behind us, he said, and they'll never know which ones remain unlocked, or who locked them in the first place. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain and ash from years ago, and Ethan's gaze fell on the street below where a small cafe door creaked in the breeze. His mind lingered on a single truth. The man who had shaped this new equilibrium had done so by refusing survival, by choosing freedom over control, by walking away from a world that could not contain him. The legend remained, invisible and untouchable, like a phantom threading through the lives of those who had survived in the storm. Ilsa leaned closer, voice soft. "Do you think you'll ever come back?" Ethan's eyes didn't leave the street. "I don't know," he admitted, and maybe that's the point. Some people leave their mark, then disappear. The world changes around them, but they don't answer to it. They never have to. A faint shudder ran through the air, as if the city itself acknowledged the balance. Tenuous, precarious, held by invisible hands. The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening over rooftops, alleys and plazas that had once been battlefields. The equilibrium was quiet, but it carried the tension of potential. The reminder that freedom required vigilance, even in peace. Ethan turned back to the apartment, closing the balcony door with deliberate care. The lock clicked, a soft, final sound that carried more meaning than words. Somewhere, another door had closed long ago, and no one knew if it had locked from the inside. He stood in silence for a moment, listening to the city's pulse, feeling the weight of endings and beginnings stacked together. The world hadn't been won. It had been rewritten. It had been freed, but at a cost no one could fully measure. And in that quiet, in the fragile balance of a world reshaped, Ethan Hunt realized the truth. Some legends aren't meant to be captured, some wars aren't meant to be ended, and some doors are never meant to be opened again. Outside, the city continued its ordinary rhythm, unaware that history had been rewritten in the shadows. Somewhere beyond sight, the man who refused to walk away existed still, a ghost, a force, a balance that no one could ever control. The world had changed, and nothing would ever be the same.